candidates. That means if your question is predominantly campaign related, the congressman may not be able to directly answer it due to ethics guidelines. We will be using our question raffle system today. We found this to be the fairest and most efficient way to ensure a range of voices are heard. Here's how it works. We will draw numbers and read them here. If your number is called, please line up at one of the two mic stands here and here. This will be the only way to ask a question. And please, if you do see that your question is asked and we put your number is called and it's on the board, please come forward so we can do this as quickly as possible. And if your number is listed, when you come to the microphone, show a team member your ticket to confirm and ask your question. To make sure we can get to as many people as possible, each audience mic will be live for about 30 seconds. So try to ask your question faster than how slow I'm doing this intro. This process is based on feedback that we've received from previous town halls to make the Q&A as fair and as productive as possible. Okay, let's get started. And I'll quickly read the first few questions if you can just turn it. So 950, 899, and 900. If those are the last three numbers on your ticket, please come forward to one of the two microphones. Thank you so much for being here today, and I'll turn it over to Rep. Schneider.
Hi, good morning all, or good afternoon. So first, let me say thank you all for coming out on a rainy day. We did not anticipate the rain, to say the least, but we were relieved. It is now a nice day, so thank you all for coming out on a nice day too, and spending your time with us. I may be squinting a little. I broke my glasses on Thursday, so if I have to look it out, I'll pull it out, but I'm missing a lens. And my old glasses were just giving me a headache. So I can see my notes, I can see you, and you guys will ask the questions. But if I squint, I'm sorry. I want to get quickly to the question, so I'm going to jump in to that quickly. But before I do, touch on a couple of things. Obviously, the big news and what a lot of people have been writing into the office about are related to the One Big Bad Bill, which is now One Big Bad Law, OBBB. And if you follow this at all, this was the priorities of President Trump that he literally rammed through Congress. There's a lot of irony here because much of what's in that bill, certainly more than half, is in that common ground space where Democrats and Republicans agree with each other, where if we had worked together, we could have passed a bill that would have put the interests of the American people first. And I would argue would have been more fiscally responsible. That's not where we ended up. So at the top lines, if you've been following this, you know that the way it is structured, it is estimated by the nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office that 17 million people are going to lose their health care over the next 10 years because of what the Republican bill, the OBB, does. Another several million families are going to lose access to our anti-hunger programs, including like SNAP, the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, which means millions of kids are going to be going to school next month hungry. And we know that if kids go to school hungry, it's harder for them to learn. So you can just see the cascade effects. I'm going to jump back and forth a little bit on this. The way the bill is funded is part of that was cutting $1 trillion out of Medicaid, but the federal government, because the way the bill is written, is going to borrow $4 trillion over the next 10 years to pay for this bill. And it's expected because of that borrowing, there'll be another $1 trillion of interest expense in addition to what we're already, and interest is already, or servicing our debt's already our biggest expense. So we're talking about $5 trillion. Because of that impact on the debt, the One Big Bad Bill is going to cut Medicare rules of sequestration by $500 billion, $500 billion. So these are some of the things in this bill. One of the agenda items, and this is not an area where there was any overlap, is President Trump and the Republicans are trying to wipe out all the progress we made in the Inflation Reduction Act. on energy and renewable energy projects. These are solar projects and wind projects, projects that are taking place all over the country. And it cuts the funding for all of these things that will cost hundreds of thousands of jobs, will put America back in the fight against climate change. Something to consider that in China in 2024 installed more renewable energy, solar and wind capacity than exists in the rest of the world altogether. So think about that. China is leading the way on solar and wind, doubling what the world capacity is, while the United States is turning its back on that. It's going to cost jobs and it's going to cost opportunities. And so these are just some of these things in this one big bad bill. But it was all consuming. If you watched, you saw that the House stayed up all through the night in May. The Senate stayed up all through the night, and the House again stayed up all through the night. Senate in June and the House again in July. In fact, I've done more late night, all night duties in the last couple of months in the House than I have any time since we were raising our kids. And by the way, my wife Julie's here somewhere. She'll attest to that. And there is some corollary because there was a lot of whining when our kids were babies, and there's been a lot of whining from the Freedom Caucus in the time since. So there is that overlap. But what hasn't happened in that process is that we haven't focused yet on funding the government. All right, you probably think it is 2025, but according to the federal government operating budget, it is 2024. And the reason for that is that when the Republicans came back so last year, the fiscal year ends on September 30th. So October 1st started fiscal year 2025, last year in 24. And the Republicans at that time couldn't agree, so they passed a continuing resolution for 3 months. And then there was the election, and President Trump was going to be president again. So they wanted to wait, and they kicked it off till March. So now we're 6 months into 2025 without a budget. And then in March, they said, you know what? Let's just not do 2025 at all. And they did a continuing resolution all the way to September 30th, which means right now we are still operating under the priorities of 2024, ignoring the priorities of 2025. And one immediate impact, and before I take questions, I'm going to finish with a positive thing. One immediate impact is that the community project funding requests or applications that we were supporting that fund projects like addressing floodwaters and reducing flooding, or supporting, we helped the YMCA, we're going to a ribbon cutting in a couple weeks, YMCA in Northbrook, get a new roof, or addressing the water sanitation plant in McHenry County that we're trying to get funds for, right? I guess I'll do the good news now. In 22, 23, and 24, we helped bring $92 million for more than 40 projects to the district to help communities address that. We had 15 projects we were advocating for in 2025, and they didn't get funded because 2025 didn't happen, right? So it's still 2025. They'll just pretend it never happens. But we haven't made progress on 2026. So the good news is that our 15 community project funding applications for 2026 have made it through the subcommittee level. But so far, only 2 bills of the 12 have made it to the House to get their vote, and the Senate hasn't even started on it. So it means that in October 1st, either there's going to be a government shutdown or there's going to be another continuing resolution. It'll be 2024 still, and that's where we are, and that's the frustration. And why am I talking about this? My third point before we get to questions is this week you were probably watching the news about rescissions. Rescissions is a fancy word for what Congress funded the president didn't want to fund, and said to Congress, hey, demanded essentially the Republicans, take this money back. And it was $9 billion for PBS, Corporation for Public Broadcasting, Sesame Street, right? But it's not just Sesame Street, it's public broadcasting in rural communities, right? Here, it rained. You know it rained, right? We had our radio stations, we had our TV. There used to be apps. Well, there still are apps. They used to get information from the National Weather Service. That's being challenged. But if you're in a rural community, it's that local TV station that provided the information. If you're in a rural community, your connection for the weather. For us, it was, do we take an umbrella? But if you're a farmer, that connection to the weather takes on a different level. And those radio stations are losing their funding all across the country because of this. And the biggest chunk of it was pulling back on USAID, money we give to other countries to advance and protect US interests, to ensure US leadership. But here's the key thing, that $9 billion, now remember, $4 trillion in the one big bag bill, that's $4,000 billion. They say, oh, we are showing fiscal responsibility by saving $9 billion. They were just spending 4,000. Last I checked, 4,000 is bigger than 9 by a lot. But the 9 was an agreement negotiated in funding bills between Democrats and Republicans. And the Republicans says, I know we agreed that in the past, but we're just going to rescind it. A deal we make today, we will not honor tomorrow. So now let me go back to funding the government on October 1st. Republicans can't fund the government without support of Democrats. You need 60 votes in the Senate, and we expect in the House that there are enough Republicans who are going to stand up that they're going to need bipartisan support. But I'll be honest, if I can't trust them to honor a deal we'll make today, when we get a month or a year from now, how do I make in good faith a compromise to make sure we fund the government on October 1st? And that is the challenge we are going to face. How do we trust you? And it's going to make governing really hard. So the one big bad bill, you saw it rush through, and the Republicans didn't try to find compromise. They didn't want compromise. We will not talk to you. But they have to have compromise to fund the government going forward. And we have to hold them to account to honor whatever agreements we might make, and that's going to be the challenge. So that's the summary from Lake Wobegon, and it's kind of where we are, but it's where we're focused on with. So that, let me turn it over to the questions. Do we have them? I'm going to pull out my one lens glasses so I can see a little bit better.
As we go along, but I'm going to erase these and draw the next 5. You can start with it.
Thank you. Is this mic hot? Great. This asking an idea sounded great until you're the first one. Asking a question.
Yeah.
So I'm a little nervous. My name is Dr. Sarah Kelly. I'm interested in your take on the elimination of the Grad Plus loans as it relates to graduate and professional education. You mentioned that many Americans will be losing their health care, but it's also the preparation of the future doctors and nurses in this country that is at stake. It is obliterating potentially access to clinical, professional medical education from underrepresented in medicine and low socioeconomic students.
And the one big bad bill, just to add to that, caps student loans below the cost of getting a degree, a med degree. Right.
$1,000.
Yeah, so about a little more than 1 year of school.
Correct.
And I don't know about you, but I don't want my doctor to have only 1/3 of a medical education.
Dated at Howard Johnson's. Yeah.
Yes. Holiday Inn Express.
That was it.
Yeah, this is exactly it. The ideas of ready, fire, aim. Oh, we'll save this money. Who cares what impact it will have? And the impact it will have is we don't have enough doctors. I mentioned the one big bad bill. It's estimated that 300 rural hospitals are at risk of closing because of that bill. But those hospitals are already understaffed, not just doctors, it's all levels of medical professionals. And those people, if as we stand here in Lake Forest, and God forbid we had a medical emergency and we hit the button, we'd have ambulances coming from Condell, from Lake Forest, from Highland Park. And before we get out to parking lot, there'd be 3 ambulances out there, right? But if we were in a rural community, we're an hour and a half, or 2 hours, and it keeps getting farther as these hospitals close. And if you need a specialist, even if the hospital's there, you can't get the specialist. I've been leading on issues. One is the Conrad 30 bill to allow states doctors who are from other countries, educated in the U.S., not having to go back to the other country to do their residency and prepare. Each state gets 30 slots. They can trade those slots so we can get doctors where they need to be. I'd love to see it be 50, not 30. Creating more opportunities for nurses. We have a shortage of residency slots in general because those are expensive and trying to get funding. I have a bill that would add 1,000 residency spots. That sounds like a lot, but it's doesn't meet a need. So yeah, no, it's an issue I'm very focused on and very concerned about.
Thank you so much.
So thank you.
Hi, my name's David Rose. My question's about healthcare. Today in the Wall Street Journal, they highlighted the Affordable Care Act price increases are going to be double digit. Illinois is leading the pack at 27%. When you think the term Affordable Care Act, I believe that's the definition of an oxymoron. Feels like we've in a time machine back in 2007. You, as the run up to the 2008 election, there was, all the talk was healthcare. In 2010, the Affordable Care Act was passed. And I think as a party, Democratic Party, and as a country, we thought we had moved beyond the problem of healthcare. We hear a lot about home ownership affordability, but I don't think we've ever really solved that first issue, because the Affordable Care Act merely opened up a whole bunch of exchanges that have deductibles that are $15,000, $18,000, $19,000. So you have an insurance policy that you can't really use. And I'm wondering, as you struggle to get through the next 18 months until the 2026 midterms, if it makes sense as congressman, as a Democratic congressman, to challenge the party, challenge the country, challenge your GOP colleagues to say the Affordable Care Act is a broken policy. It never worked. We took a right turn when we should have taken a left turn when Rahm was running the show for Obama, and we should have gone with universal coverage, but we didn't. And I think we're trying to solve a math equation that keeps coming up, no solution. And should we propose universal coverage, pulling the yoke of healthcare off of corporate America, suggest, the one big ugly bill that we're going to take corporate taxes up because we're taking the yoke of healthcare off of you. We're going to limit the budget deficit impact of taking on universal care,
Right.
But we're also going to reset the table of how healthcare is given. And you're talking about how to get doctors to rural communities. It's a complicated.
Yeah, and I just want to make sure we get to a lot. So I got it's a great question. Thank you for the question. I'll quote President Obama during the time the Affordable Care Act was being debated, which was, if I were designing a system from scratch, this is not the system I would design, but this is the system we have. And so one of the things when I first started running and continue to talk about is, we don't get to start from scratch, but we can move, and I would love to see us move to at least a public option that gives that opportunity. As you said, the burden, it's not just large corporations. Many large corporations privately insure, but middle-sized companies and small businesses providing for their employees. And I'm going to pick on the small businesses. Having run a small business, and a lot of small businesses can't afford healthcare. This was one of the ideas behind the exchanges, so they couldn't provide healthcare to their employees. And so you've got a business trying to go from 0 to 60, whatever metaphor you want to use, but they can't get there because the employees they want to hire need to go work for super big company because they have little kids, want healthcare, whatever the case may be. And you create a systemic disparity in access to talent. And if you are, I don't care what size business you are, there's 4 things you need for business: a business model. Government shouldn't be defining business models. Let the entrepreneurs and business managers do that. But access to capital, access to talent, and stable business environment are critical. We're talking healthcare as a business model. They need talent, but every business is struggling with that talent. Access to capital, as the government continues to borrow and competes with other businesses for that access to capital, the price of capital is going up. And we can spend all day talking about the lack of a stable business environment because it is 2:20. Thankfully, it's a weekend, but if it was a weekday, we could have tariffs on, tariffs off, tariffs on before we finish the hour here, and it makes it impossible. I met with a local business that didn't delay a $100 million investment, but canceled a $100 million investment because of the tariffs and the uncertainty around the tariffs. And it was an investment here in the 10th district. The jobs in building the facility, the people who would work in that facility, doesn't come to be. That didn't answer your question, so let me go back to private to the public option so people can get access to that health care. And I'll start with the basic principle. Everybody, wherever they live, whoever they are, in the United States should have access to quality, affordable health care from providers they trust and know where they are when they need it. It's that simple. And I liked how you said it. We keep trying to figure out this math problem and it keeps coming back. No answer, I'm going to add yet. And we got to keep working at that answer. I was reading The Economist magazine this morning. The cover this week is on cancer. You know, the opening statement or early statement was really interesting. Cancer numbers, we keep seeing them going up and saying, what's happening? Part of it is we're living longer. And so what they're saying is if you adjust cancer deaths for age worldwide over the last generation, they're down by about 30% because we're making extraordinary progress. And especially cancer deaths among young kids are we haven't beaten cancer, but we've made great progress on cancer. Cancers that were 95% mortality 40 years ago today are 95% survival of childhood cancers. That's progress. It's not the solution. And we're targeting cancers with new research. I also saw a cartoon today. It looked like it was a New Yorker cartoon. It was online. And it's two cave people sitting at a wheel chiseling it. And one guy comes up to the other and says, we need to cancel the research. The Neanderthals are back in control. I will let you judge. So I wish I had thought of that, but it was a good thing. We need to do better on healthcare. And the last thing I'll say in this one, when I first got into this more than a decade ago, I knew I wanted to be on the Ways and Means Committee because my dad was a CPA and I would grow up as a kid talking about the importance of tax policy. Now, tax policy could drive behaviors and incentives and you could actually do stuff. And incentives have an impact. And I said, this is really cool. And Ways and Means is tax. Tariffs are a tax. It should be Ways and Means, not Democrats or Republicans, but Congress by the Constitution and the Ways and Means Committee. And it's not. But Ways and Means is also responsible for healthcare. And I didn't realize that a decade ago, but I know now. My first subcommittee when I got on Ways and Means was on the health subcommittee. So suddenly I found myself here. So I'm up to my ears on this. And we know that technology is going to be a piece of it. But we got to train those doctors. In the earlier question, that's how I end up with those. We got to bring down the costs of medicines. There's no easy way. The Inflation Reduction Act was a step. President Trump is talking about lowering the cost of medicines. I'm with him on this one. But we got to do it in a way that makes sure that we get those cures delivered. And cutting NIH, cutting FDC funding, CDC funding, FDA funding, CDC funding. Well, he's also cutting FDC. But all of these healthcare related, that research doesn't stop. It's going to Europe. It's going to China. And I'll finish on this. I had a conversation with someone in the industry. And I said, if China, and this made me shudder, if China continues to improve their equivalent of the FDA, the Federal Food and Drug Administration, but approving medicines, and it improves its capabilities, its capacities, and its credibility, these are my terms, then pharma companies are going to go to China to establish those, do that research and get those approvals. Because if the world recognized China approval as the gold standard and not the US, what does that mean for the US healthcare industry? So everything is so linked together. We need people in Washington who understand that and are working to drive that. So thanks for the question. All right, I'll give shorter answers, I promise.
Really quick, I'm just going to read the next set of numbers. So if your number is called, you can come up. And I can't see.
I can read them. 94, 894, 920, 885, and 931. Make your way to a microphone.
Okay. Thank you, Congressman. It's good to see you again. And I want to thank you, one, for having this town hall. And I want to thank everybody here who is taking time out of their day, and welcome the people who are online, because that's the most important thing, be
100%.
involved in your government. So my name is Jim Axelrad. I live in Highland Park. I am a volunteer, a non-paid volunteer for SCORE. Now, I know you've always been a champion of small businesses. I know you yourself had a small business. And the question that I have today is all about the fact that in the new bill, they cut the funding that SCORE was received only $17 million. Now, I know that it sounds like a very small amount of money and it doesn't sound like a big issue, but there's 10,000 volunteers like myself across the United States that are not paid who help small businesses. The thing that this audience probably doesn't know about SCORE is that last year we returned $42 for every dollar we receive from the government. So how can you help us get funding back now that the bill is passed? What can we do to get that funding so we can continue to help America's small businesses that create over 70% of the employment in the United States and grow the pie so that there's more dollars coming in?
So you didn't mean to do this, but you gave me a chance to brag about my son. But before I do, let me say thank you, because SCORE is the, to know this, the core, what does the S stand for? Senior Corps of Retired Executives.
Right.
Yeah. So these are business people who, after they retire, volunteer to help small businesses, sometimes young, and I'm going to tell this story in a second, figure out what the heck they're doing to try to grow. And it creates jobs, which is where I get to now brag about my son.
And we also work with existing businesses who there's nobody to talk to
Right.
sometimes. And so they need to know how to talk to their accountant to get the numbers they need. So we also work with a lot of existing businesses.
Yeah, it's folks who they have nowhere to turn. They're not flush with cash, and so they can go to these people who've been in there. You can tell I love SCORE. So our son, Daniel, our younger son, was a zookeeper. And on Thursdays, they'd go to a bar and they'd do trivia. And he became friends with the bartender. I'm going to make this really quick. And one day the bartender had to go to the restroom and he said, Daniel, will you cover for me? And he did. So first, he was good at it. So he started doing trivia for free beer. And then it was for a little bit of money. Long story short, he now does more than a dozen venues. He lives out in California. He's got half a dozen young people, mostly students working for him part-time. Okay, this is a guy who had zero interest in business, had no clue what to do. He was calling me nonstop, and my wife nonstop saying, what about this? What about, he still calls. So that's, and we love the calls. But I said, call SCORE in your community. And he has an advisor who he trusts, who he can talk to. It's not calling dad for help. Right. It's going to somebody who's got this experience. And so this zookeeper who was great with animals but had no interest in business is now dealing with, what do I do when a guy doesn't show up? What do I do when the electricity goes out at my venue and I don't want to charge the venue, but I have to pay the kid who showed up and didn't work? These kinds of things. And this is what SCORE provides. So it is so crucial. And as Jim said, small businesses generate the vast majority of new jobs in this country. And some of them grow to be big businesses. So it's about 55% of people work at what are defined as small businesses, but it's much more of the creation. And SCORE, for almost no money, I'm going to guess it's probably even bigger than a 42-to-1 return, but I would take that all day long. Yeah. And we cut our nose off to spite our face and we say, well, it's just a bunch of old people helping businesses that don't need help. And so I can promise you this, I'm going to champion SCORE. I will continue to fight. It's within the SBA. It shouldn't be worldwide wrestling, and that's only funny if you know that Linda McMahon used to run the SBA. She's now running education. But we've got to make sure that the SBA stays healthy and strong and is providing not just, remember I went through the access to talent, access to capital. This is a case where we provide help with that business model. So thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Brad.
Hey, Mark.
Mark Dubofsky from Highland Park. So my question is, what are your thoughts on how to make Congress more functional so that it fulfills its congressional role?
Thank you all very much. It was a great day. Yeah. You know, one of my best friends, I came in to Congress with him in my first term, was a guy named Derek Kilmer. And Derek, I'm the chair of the New Democrat Coalition. Derek previously chaired it's a one-term thing. He chaired the New Dems. And after he chaired it, because this is an issue we talk a lot about, he was tasked by Nancy Pelosi, who was Speaker at the time, with a basically fix the Congress Select Committee. And it was a bipartisan committee from South Carolina. I'll remember his name in a second. But they were working on it. They had a good relationship. They came up with a long list of ideas, and some of them have been implemented. One is we don't pay our staff enough, and so we have a hard time keeping staff. So we were able to give a 20% raise to our staff from the work of this committee. But a lot of the other stuff he was stymied. The punchline is Derek now works at the I think it's the Roosevelt Institute or some Washington think tank. He's no longer in Congress for a lot of reasons, but I think his frustration on this. We've got to make Congress work better. We've got to make the folks work across the aisle better. One of the things, and I'm part of the problem solvers, this is one of the great successes of the problem solvers that was undone by Kevin McCarthy in his pursuit of the speakership, is we took away the one vote can sink a speaker rule. And we introduced, this is the rules of the House, so it's internal, but it said that only the party, the leader of either party, the majority leader, the minority leader, can bring down can bring a motion to bring down, it's called vacate the chair, the speaker, and they need the support of a majority of their side. So if it's a Democrat wanting to bring down the speaker, they need the majority of the Democrats, the Republican, the majority of the Republicans. And that was, I thought, a really good change that Kevin McCarthy, if you remember his, what I call the student council election, where he kept going 15 times, he finally went back to one, and then Matt Gaetz became the one and brought down McCarthy. It just creates a dysfunction. We need to fix the calendar. So if you were watching closely in Congress, so the big bad bill ran through June. They kept us over 4th of July week, and then they said, don't come back next week. Stay in your district, which was nice, except here's the catch. We've got to fund the government. I talked about that. August is always a recess district work period because Washington's too hot to get anything done. That's just going back to the beginning of our republic. But it meant in July there were 3 weeks of work. But a work week, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Monday's a fly-in day. We have votes at 6:30, but it's mostly a check-in. Tuesday and Wednesday are full days. And then Friday is a fly-out day, so people out west can get out. So most people leave by 12, 1 o'clock. Now, I'm lucky I can stay and work the full day, and I can leave my office at 5 and be home for dinner by 8 because of O'Hare, but most people can't do that. It means a work day is 2 days. What it means is that then that you cancel a week, and we have 3 weeks, we have 6 full days. We lost 2. This week, they wasted 2 full days because they knocked down the rule, all that. So as we talk about the appropriations that we need to fund the government, there's only 2 days in July. So I would change the calendar, would be one of those ways, and make it more functional. I'd provide a housing allowance. No member of Congress should be living in their office. But I also respect the fact that if you have one income and we're paid nicely, it's $175,000. It's $174,500. It's been that since 2009. But if you have 2 kids, you have a mortgage in your home in North Dakota or Mississippi or California, it doesn't matter, 2 kids in college, and you're expected to pay for an apartment in Washington, it's really tough. So a lot of people have no choice but to stay in their office. Well, let's give them a housing allowance. They did take half a step on that one, but it comes out of our, what we get is called a member's representational allowance. That's the money I have to pay for my travel back and forth, my office rent, but also my staff. So if I'm taking money for an apartment, I'm taking money that I can't pay my staff, and that's a challenge. So those are some things. The committee hearings, the way they're structured, giving everyone a chance to ask questions, the ability to have conversations, what I would call regular order, which we don't need a rule change. We just need a commitment to follow that. A bill's introduced, it goes to committee, allow people to bring amendments. Long list, but yes, there's lots we could do. Thank you.
For a question over here, and I also want to flag, we pulled 4 new numbers. We're doing a good job keeping questions short, but if I can ask, make sure if we can.
And I'll shorten my answers.
Keep questions up to 30 seconds so we can get to as many questions as we can today. We have 935, 913, 938, 890, and then I'm going to draw a few more and then erase this now. So we'll go right here.
Hello, my name is Stephen Ladewig, and I'm from the Round Lake Beach communities. Why were you flying to the Middle East and condemning anti-ICE protesters last month instead of fighting against the big, beautiful bill? You voted with the Trump agenda to strengthen repressive capabilities of ICE and Border Patrol and praised Trump's unconstitutional bombing of Iran. You've said that you want to collaborate with Republicans, and why weren't you focused on fighting for the 150,000 Medicaid recipients in your district? I am one of them. The people of Lake County deserve a representative who will actually stand up to the Trump's far-right agenda and defend our immigrant families, not someone who supports Trump's brutal immigration regime and foreign policy. I'm also a Latino and the son and grandson of immigrants to this country. My community is scared. We actually just had ICE in my community yesterday sweep someone up from a local salon. My community members are not in the street anymore. We're scared to be in the street. We're canceling parades all across the city in Chicago. What are you going to do to stand up against this ICE terror that my community is facing?
So thanks for the question. I'll start on immigration. I too am the grandson of immigrants, and I have throughout my time in Congress, I will always continue to fight for immigration. And I have stood up to this administration, not just with the big bad bill, but other things they are doing. We have pushed on our website the information of what to do, what are your rights, et cetera. I have been working on immigration, not just with the Trump administration, but with Biden and my first term when President Obama was in office, working to make sure. So I will continue to do that. To your opening question, why was I in the Middle East? Well, first of all, Congress wasn't in session, so I was not ignoring time here. I was using, but why was I there? Because this was a long planned trip. I'm chair of what's called the Abraham Accords Caucus. I don't know if you're familiar with the Abraham Accords. So you're not, I'll explain it. It was a peace treaty, normalization treaty between Israel, UAE, United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, Morocco's a part of it, Sudan is even a part of it. I have spent my lifetime working to try to bring peace to the Middle East, and I will spend the rest of my life working to bring peace to the Middle East. The Abraham Accords, which were signed in 2020, for the first time put in writing that both Jews and Arabs belong to the same land, and they must find a way to live together in that land. And by doing so, they will lift up not only the area, but the people who live there. So this was an Abraham Accords trip sponsored by the Jeffrey Talpins Foundation with the Atlantic Council and part of the N7 initiative. We were planning to go to Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, UAE, and Israel. The goal of the trip at the time was to look for ways to strengthen and expand the Abraham Accords. In fact, documented now, one of the reasons that Hamas attacked on October 7th in 2023 is because Saudi Arabia and Israel were about to sign a normalization agreement. That would be a good thing, not a step backwards, but a giant leap forwards. So we were there. My wife was actually with me. It was a bipartisan trip, 2 Democratic members, 2 Republican members. On this trip, we met with leaders in Saudi, Bahrain, and UAE. We weren't able to go to Israel, but I will continue to work to find and charter that path to peace to lead to a better place. So that was one. You asked about ICE, and I anticipated this question. You were saying I supported ICE. That's not what the resolution was. It was a resolution introduced by Gabe Evans. And I can give this to you so you don't have to look it up. But what the resolution says, it talked about the attack in Boulder, where a gentleman basically firebombed citizens who were marching for the rescue of the hostages held by Hamas in Gaza and end to this war. Something I think we can all agree on. This condemns that attack. It lists a number of things that happened, and it has 3 resolve clauses. It condemns the attacker. It affirms that free and open communication with law enforcement remains the bedrock of public safety. And it says, express gratitude to law enforcement officers for protecting the homeland. I think we can all agree with it at that point. They added a clause, but they also took out a clause. Let me talk about what they added, because this is what gives all of us heartburn. And it says, including U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement. So the full sentence is expresses gratitude to law enforcement officers, including U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, for protecting the homeland. It doesn't empower them, but it made a specific call out. And it makes it difficult. And I took offense to that. But here's where I was able to do something else that doesn't make the news. In the original draft, it said, and I don't have the original, but I have how it ends up. It said, it says, whereas while shouting, quote, free Palestine, end quote, Mohammed Sabri Salman attacked peaceful demonstrators with homemade Molotov cocktails. Now, the original draft of this said, whereas while shouting free Palestine, an anti-Semitic statement. And I went to the Republicans, and this is why I work with Republicans, because sometimes you can stop bad things happen. They said, while shouting free Palestine, an anti-Semitic statement, yada, yada, yada. And I said, you can't say that. I said, free Palestine by itself is not an anti-Semitic statement. It's an aspiration of the Palestinian people for a state of their own. Now, if they're saying wipe Israel out, that I will condemn. But aspiring for their own state, I'm a Zionist. I believe in the Jewish aspiration for a state of their own. A Zionist who really believes that cannot deny the aspirations of the Palestinians for the exact same thing. That's the Abraham Accords. But by taking that out, sometimes you have to give something, which was a vote to support the final resolution, to get something, which was Congress not saying free Palestine is anti-Semitic. So that's the trade-off that doesn't always make the news, but I would say I got more than I gave. So that's that. So thank you for the question.
Hi, Katya Slavina from Highland Park.
Nice to see you.
Good to see you. Thank you. Speaking of ICE, with the expanded use of ICE recently and the increased budget for ICE, what guardrails still exist to make sure that they're used for their intended purpose and not to terrorize communities?
Yeah. It's the $1 million question. I'm going to repeat the question because it was so important. Within that big bad bill is $170 billion for ICE. It's a huge amount of money. And so the question was, what guardrails are still in place? I don't mean this to be cute, but the first guardrails are sitting in the audience. It's all, and I'm going to put myself there too. It's all of us. And it's all of us saying that this is not who we are as a country. And that the Constitution, which creates the separation of powers in the legislature and the executive and the judiciary, is what keeps all of us protected. And the Fifth Amendment, which has the clause, every person, it doesn't say citizen, it says person is entitled to due process of law. We've got to protect that. So then the next guardrail. So it's just, we can't, they starts with a guy named Stephen Miller. Stephen Miller's counting on us getting tired, getting defeated, feeling defeated, and giving up. We can't get, then this goes back to the previous question. We can't get tired, we can't feel defeated, and we must never give up. And that is the stand. So we also have the guardrails of the court. Now, the Supreme Court ruled on this birthright, and they didn't rule on birthright, but they ruled on a district court being able to issue a nationwide injunction. And I'm not a lawyer, and so certainly not a constitutional lawyer, fully understanding how this works, because there's class actions and there's all these all these steps. But other courts, New Hampshire, others, I think Boston's one, that has said the injunction on birthright is still there. So we're watching constitutional law, which the Constitution's a living document. The interpreter of the Constitution is a constantly ongoing process, and we're watching it at a time of great dynamism and threat, because we have a court that, two people on the court, we know how they think, but mostly because they don't think about this. That's my pejorative look at it. But there are things that are truly open questions. There are things that shouldn't be open questions. And there are abuses by this administration, utter disregard for the Constitution, undermining the rule of law, total disparaging of entire groups of people that don't reflect who we are as a country. And the final one is the ability to pass laws. But in Congress, the legislature, its majority takes all on that ability to ultimately pass a law. The Speaker of the House determines what comes to the floor with the exception of what's called a discharge petition. I'll explain in a second. So we have 213 Democrats. No, we have 215 Democrats. 3 are open because of deaths. One was coming back in September. I think we'll get 2 more in September and 1 more in November. We need 3 to 5 Republicans to join us to defeat a bill, if they would. But also with 218, you can force a bill to the floor in what's called a discharge petition. And if you remember in the spring, there was a discharge petition on basically parents who are taking care of a newborn at home being able to vote remotely. And we got the 200, I think it was 221 people signed it. There were a number of Republicans who signed it. but the speaker did an end around and convinced the Republican lead on this one to accept something else, so it never came to the floor. But that's what we have to do. Passing laws are, 9 judges can change a legal precedent. It takes 218 in the House, 51 or 60, depending how you process it, in the Senate, and a president to sign off. And with this president, much of what we would have to do would have to override his veto. So you need 67%. These are some of the challenges we face. So the public we're all in this together, and we can't let them beat us down. We need the courts to hold strong and keep that separation of powers. And Congress has to continue to work. And I want to reclaim our constitutional rights and prerogatives vis-a-vis the executive and the judiciary branch. So thanks for the question. Next.
Good afternoon, Mr. Schneider. My name's Lorraine Kondick, and I have a question about Social Security. In, they say, 5 to 8 years, it's going to have to be cut back by 25%. And is Congress interested in doing anything about this, as raising Social Security taxes or in raising the amount of income that the taxes are paid on to try to put more money into Social Security fund?
Yeah, great question. So Social Security doesn't go bankrupt. It doesn't get eliminated. As you rightly noted, when the Social Security Trust Fund is expended, then the amount of money coming in each year to Social Security is not sufficient to pay out the benefits that have been promised, and you'll have a cut in the 20 to 30% ratio, and that number goes up and down depending how much money's coming in and out. But and the projection is 2034, give or take a year or two when that happens. First, the history. As someone who is, my generation is crossing over into Social Security age, when we graduated college 40 plus years ago in the early 80s, we were told Social Security was going to go bust. And Congress came together and in the mid and late 80s took steps and created the Social Security Trust Fund. And basically what they did is more money was, they tweaked it, brought in more money was coming in than going out. That money went into the trust fund. It couldn't be spent on anything else. When they talk about we're spending on another thing, that's not true. That money is invested in federal securities and our nation's debt to pay interest on it. But that trust fund, it was projected to last 40 years. 40 years ago. It's our turn to step up. And again, this is a Ways and Means Committee's jurisdiction to start. My colleague, John Larson, if you meet John Larson, he says, hello, I'm John Larson. We have to fix Social Security. This is his passion. It's all he talks about. He has legislation. It's not cheap. Okay, over 100 years, it would cost $1 trillion. I will remind you that over 10 years, the one big bad bill is adding $4 trillion of debt. So it's not cheap, but it's necessary. We have to take this on. So my hope is we'll be in the majority, Democrats will be in the majority in 2026. We'll be in the majority on the Ways and Means Committee, and we can bring this bill forward. Because if we don't, the kids who are graduating college now, hearing the same thing I heard 40 years ago, won't have my generation as they're retiring. Thank God. We had 401ks, we had other things we did to do that. But Social Security, by the way, it's not a benefit. It's not an entitlement. It's an insurance program. People are paying into this program, and what they're getting back is their earned benefit. And the people who that is what they rely on, it's the difference between poverty and not poverty. And I'll finish on this. When I was in middle school, I lived in Miami, and we would go to Miami Beach, South Miami Beach, on weekends to our service projects to meet with seniors, many of them immigrants with thick accents, Holocaust survivors, people from all over the world. And I remember these people were eating dog food because they couldn't afford their food. They couldn't get their medicines. And fixing Social Security reduced that. And so we have to make sure Social Security is there. So thank you.
All right, I'd like to come to this side for a question, and I want to read the numbers on the board one more time. We have 922, 908, 945, and 925. You want to come right here? Way to turn to ask a question.
Hello there. My name is Steve Tilkin. I'm from Highland Park. I'm here with my wife.
Hi, Steve.
And have a question for you. In light of the recent violence that Democratic legislators have been experiencing in their homes and perhaps other places, what can be done to protect these legislators? Because they can easily be threatened or extorted if they vote a certain way or don't vote a certain way. And what can be done to protect them?
So thank you for the question. As a legislator, I appreciate the question. I will tweak it a little bit. It's not just Democratic legislators. In fact, right at the moment, the threats are at a higher scale and more intensity against Republicans who dare to stand up to the president. So it is all legislators, and I'm going to speak to that. We are working following January 6th. The House, back to the question of what can Congress do and how do we prove, we can take up to $10,000 from our MRA. So it comes from that allowance on a one-time expense for capital improvements. So it's really for security cameras, et cetera, at our homes. You will notice here, all of you got wanded as you came in. Let me thank first the Lake Forest Police for being here and keeping us safe. Thank you. But also Houston Security Services, in addition to Lake Forest Police. The MRA pays for Houston. And so all of that comes out of this same pool. We are trying to increase the allowance and create a separate account because not everyone faces the same threat, but that we are keeping our members of Congress. And it's not just the members of Congress, it's our staff, and in a town hall like this, it's our community safe. We have to do that. So that is the responding to the threats. But there's another side to this. We have to change the rhetoric in this country. We have to change how we talk to each other. I'll talk to anyone. I'm willing to sit at a table to break bread and talk to anyone if they're respectful. We can have different opinions on the right, on the left, but we need to listen to each other. We need to engage. I shared with our kids. I share with my team. I'll share with everybody. I don't need to convince you you're wrong to be confident of what I believe, but I'm not so certain of anything I know not to hear what you have to say and shift my position if appropriate. And we have to get back to that view. But part of that is how we talk and how we talk on radio and TV and et cetera. But it's also how we talk in our classrooms and how we talk in our houses of worship. It's everywhere that there is no reason or justification to demonize people we disagree with. We can disagree with them and we can disagree with them vociferously, but when you demonize and worse, dehumanize and treat them as they are a threat to the universe, then you quickly get on a slippery slope where violence is on that path, and we have to stop that. So thank you.
Hey, Brad. Andy Kenny from Deerfield. I want to get back to ICE. The abuses that we're seeing day in and day out are significant and appalling. From the masked people who are not showing badges, not using warrants and all of that, to the detention facilities that are being constructed all around this country. I want to know what it is that you and your colleagues can do about that. And one specific question is, I know that you have the right to go in and observe detention facilities, but your colleagues have been routinely denied access. And I see that on the TV, I see the denials, but what comes next? How can you enforce your right to have some accountability from this administration?
Thanks, Andy. I'm gonna break that to two questions. I want to talk about the masks first. All right. So where we live, you're not supposed to park on the street overnight. So if you forget, or my son is visiting, park on the street, and there's a knock on the door, and there's a police officer, you see the uniform, you see the badge with the name, you see the number, and you see his face or her face. And that's the way it should be. And that's not, I'm picking something silly like a car parked, because for any circumstance, we should be able to know, A, that it is legitimately an officer of the community, the city, the state, the country, in all those. And there are police the Postal Service has a police force, and justifiably so. You can go into, but we need to be able to see them. So there's legislation to try to address that issue, because what we're seeing is this administration trying to create not just the shock effect, but create fear of seeing that on TV, but fear in the people who are being detained or questioned. So we're trying to move legislation. I'll go back to the fact in the minority. So this is a challenge, and we need to address that issue. That's just I'm going to go back to due process of law. Well, I guess there is one more piece to that. If we don't have that, then nefarious characters can dress up and pretend. We have enough. I've got enough problems with my bank from Bangladesh calling me, or from wherever, saying we need your credit card information right away, or my grandson who's being held in Paris and needs immediately advance of cash. This just opens the door for a whole nother way for that kind of fraud. So that's why we have that legislation. Going into the ICE detention centers, it is our right and our prerogative to go and inspect. This is the part of oversight. Congress makes the laws. It's the responsibility of the executive branch to faithfully execute the laws, and it is the responsibility of Congress to oversee that faithful execution, because even if they think they're doing it in the best of intentions, sometimes there's unintended consequences. We need to do that. And so we need that oversight, and on that oversight committee, they're having those conversations. But because this is an interbranch, it goes to the courts as well. And we need to be in the courts saying we have a right to be here, announced, unannounced, accompanied, unaccompanied. If I want to go and inspect the detention center, my district, or anywhere else in this country, as a member of Congress, that is my prerogative. And there should be nothing to hide in Alligator Alley. Now, we know, if you've seen the reports coming out of Alligator Alley, and this is just one example, there's a lot to hide, and that elevates the importance of us being able to get there and see it. And so we'll continue to do that. We have a litigation task force. I can find out if they filed. I assume they have. But I mentioned before, I'm not a lawyer. We have a lot of good lawyers, quite a few lawyers in Congress, so they're leading that. But I know Joe Neguse and Jamie Raskin and others are leading that charge. So I assume they have.
All right, we'll come over to this side, and I want to read these four numbers. We're already at the top of the hour, so
we can go a little longer.
Okay. The four numbers I've called.
I just have to go get my glasses.
Yes. 911, 946, 882, 903.
Hi, my name is Hillary Bryant from Lake Bluff. Thank you for coming. I'd like to thank the last lady and the other folks that have asked the questions about ICE and the immigration policy. That was going to be my first question, because out of all the horrible things that are happening right now, I think that's the most horrifying. But with all of that, I'll ask another one that's important to me. With LGBTQ plus rights under attack nationwide, will you co-sponsor stronger protections for trans youth and push back on book bans in schools?
My keychain says I read banned books, so that one comes. The answer is yes, and I don't think it's hard to come up with a ranking of the awful things this administration is doing. Talking to trans youth, trans adults, talking to parents of trans youth, the horrific stress and strain. It's hard raising kids. It's hard raising kids who are going through one of the worst identity crises you can imagine, feeling trapped. And I don't care if it's trapped in the wrong body, trapped in the wrong place. It's hard growing up in this country, in this era, in this time. And what this administration is doing, attacking these kids, dehumanizing these kids, and empowering the folks who are going after these kids is wholly unacceptable. So, yes. So thank you. Sorry.
Hi. Yeah, Joel Mendes, Highland Park. My question is really about the importance of soft power. And specifically, I'm a returned Peace Corps volunteer, and I know that the Peace Corps headquarters not long ago had a visit from some of the Doge folks. And I don't know if there's still bipartisan support in Congress or not, and I'd like to know more about that. I mean, I don't think people realize or recognize that just a small amount of money that's paid for Peace Corps and the great return on investment in this country and abroad that's received.
Absolutely. Where were you with the Peace Corps?
I was in Korea. And by the way, I was there about a year and a half ago as a revisit. And you can't believe the changes. And they have their own version of Peace Corps.
Yeah. No,
that's really
absolutely.
incredible.
So I saw as I was looking who was coming and the questions asked, I started a question. I was hoping we were going to get drawn. So thank you. First of all, thank you for what you do. Peace Corps is one of the greatest programs. It's a John F. Kennedy program. It is soft power. It is young, but not just young people. I still have hope. There are people in their 70s who go on Peace Corps missions. Places around the world helping people dig water wells. What do you do in Korea?
I taught teachers, and I also taught English.
Okay. And so the knock-on effect, teaching kids is good. Those kids grow up and do things. Teaching teachers means that when you leave, there's still kids getting taught. And this is what the Peace Corps does. This also, and as we were talking, I told this to my staff and they laughed at me. The first person who endorsed me back in 2011 was Harris Wofford, who was the first administrator of the Peace Corps. So you had me at hello, but I love the Peace Corps. I also know that when the U.S. is engaged in the world and we're out and we're leading on our values and we're leading on our principles and we're bringing our allies with us who share those values, the world's a better place. And the administration disagrees with that, and they've been cutting left and right. This is why my first term I asked to be on the Foreign Affairs Committee. I've been on the Foreign Affairs Committee 5 times. I mentioned Ways and Means, my primary committee. That is what's known as an exclusive committee. You can't be on another committee unless you get special permission. And I've gotten special permission first from Speaker Pelosi, now Leader Jeffries, because I am so committed to making sure we continue to lead in the world. And I've challenged Marco Rubio, Secretary Rubio. We had a hearing before. It was last week because we weren't in the week before. It was last week where, I asked the question, isn't it better if we're doing this and doing that? And he said, yes. I said, then why are you cutting all these funds? And he couldn't answer those questions. This administration wants to pull America back from the world. On Ways and Means, I was talking to Secretary Bessent because they want to tax foreign direct investment in this country. Other countries investing and doing research here because we have the best research facilities, the best universities, et cetera, and they're going to increase that. Why are you going to chase them away? By the way, they backed off of that after I pushed on it, and others. We need to make sure that the United States is where the world is looking for example. It's to whom the world is looking for leadership, and that we are projecting our power, and our power is our values. It's the ideal of the Constitution. It's that people around the world don't want to just come here, but they want their countries to be like what this country has the potential to be, which is why, going back to what we're facing and what can we do and where are we, what I tell everyone is we have 3 things as the public to stand up to what this administration is trying to do. We have to hold on to our dream and knowledge and belief of what America can be. We have to be defiantly optimistic no matter how much crap they throw at us. And we have to persevere through it all. And that's what we're going to do. So again, thank you for the Peace Corps, and we will continue to fight for it.
Before we go to one more question, I'm just going to read those one more time and then I'm going to draw one more. But I do want to be respectful for Gorton's time at the theater here. We have 911-946-882-903. Do we have one more question over there?
Good afternoon, Congressman. Dr. Holly Devon from Libertyville. I am an NIH-funded researcher so far, so thank you for your support.
Thanks.
My question, though, is about the Supreme Court, and you touched on it. So I'm wondering if you and your colleagues have considered any kind of proposals in the future. I was hoping President Biden would have put something forward, but we know President Obama was denied a nomination Trump got a nomination 3 weeks before the 2020 election. And so our system of checks and balances is not working now. And the president has been given a pass that he can behave illegally and there won't be any consequences. So are you in favor of any kind of changes, or is there any talk of any changes?
Yep.
Thank you.
So yes, there's talk, and I'll tell you what I'm in favor of, and bear with me for a second, and I'll get to the question you specifically asked, but I want to take 2 steps. Is we have a Supreme Court of 9 people who are there for life, and for many of them, life is a really, really long time, and often goes beyond the time where they are with the same faculties or capabilities as when they started on the court. I'm being nice. So I actually believe in term limits, right? And I think it would be good if we stagger. Thank you. If we stagger those terms so that every 2 years we're appointing another Supreme Court, so that each president would get 2 appointments. Okay, but I think the appointment should be for a generation, and a generation to me is at least 20 years. So hold that thought for a second, because I have a problem with every 2 years the president appoints on a Supreme Court of 9. Because we have we have to protect the constitutional limit of 2 terms. Story for another question. But if someone serves 2 terms and they get an appointment every 2 years, they can appoint 4 out of 9 Supreme Court justices. But if there's any actuaries in the room, the likelihood of retirement or a death, or a doctor knows this as well, things can happen. And the likelihood of appointing a 5th justice in that 8-year period is close to 50%. Which means that one president would have the appointment of a majority of the court. And so that's not good. Go back to I would like 20 years. Well, the term is the number of justices times 2, 18 years. But if we increase the court to 11, the term becomes 22. So I cross my 1 threshold. And then if you appoint 5 of 11, it's not a majority. The likelihood of getting a 6th of 11 drops to, I think, the low teens. So that's better. And you could do, even if you want to do 13, it's got to be an odd number. But if you want to do 13, it'd be a 26-year term. But 11, 22-year terms sounds about right. And those every 2 things seem to make sense. And it doesn't mean that, it can still be a lifetime appointment, but your term on the Supreme Court is that 22 years. And then you roll off to an appellate role. So that's my idea. I mean, I've picked this from pieces of others, but I think that would address a lot of our challenges, so that even if a president I don't like appoints a justice I don't like, the next president who I might like more might appoint a justice I might like better. And so it creates that dynamism on the court, which I think we need. Clarence Thomas was appointed to the court by George W. Bush's father. It was George H.W. Bush. He's been there a long time. And he asked a question, I think, once. It means that you don't have that permanent presence and it means that a judge that I love will reach their 22nd year or 18th year, whatever the case might be, and would have to leave. There's a trade-off, but I think that's a step forward. So yes, I have thought a lot about it. So.
All right, we have 2 more on that side, and I want to read the last 4 numbers here. 895, 949, 933, and 936.
Hi, I'm Johanna Skoog from Libertyville. Thank you very much, Congressman, for hosting the town hall today.
Thank you.
I appreciate you being upfront and with your constituents. My question is on healthcare and the undermining of the scientific and medical community that seems to be happening right now, specifically undermining very successful vaccines that will generate a generation of unvaccinated individuals that will have lifetime consequences and healthcare needs. So is this being addressed by Congress, and what can be done?
So I've been talking about this a couple of times. I didn't talk about cervical cancer before, right? Okay, because this goes back to that article I was reading about cancer, and it's about vaccines. So cervical cancer, a generation ago, some researchers, I think it was in the UK, if I read it right, noticed that certain genes mutate to cervical cancer, and then they figured out that these genes are affected by the human papilloma virus, HPV. They developed a vaccine, and cervical cancer in the UK is down by 95%. That is a vaccine. Okay? That is science. That is NIH. Maybe whatever NIH is in Germany. I know we did it as well. Okay, it is not Robert Kennedy's elimination of the 17 science-based, thoughtful people that he fired with the crackpots and quacks that he put on a thing that said, we'll just go with what we feel rather than what the science tells us. I feel very strongly about this. Vaccines keep us healthy. Vaccines eradicated measles in this country. We have had 1,200 cases of measles this year in this country because people aren't getting those vaccines. And at some point, you have a breakdown in I'm not a scientist here, but what popularly is called that herd immunity. Less than 90% of a population vaccinated keeps more than 90% keeps the unvaccinated safe. Less than 90% means the whole community is at risk. I think I have that right. Vaccines for the flu, and we're on the cusp of trying to come up with a universal flu vaccine, so it's not changed every year. What we do now is a best guess of what strand might work this year. We can do better. But tuberculosis and you're a doctor, DT, help me with but all these vaccines kids take that keep our kids in school rather than missing days in school, whereas in Europe where the kids aren't missing those days, they are learning the things, and all the research, all of this stuff is connected. So we have to protect the science. We have to protect the research. We have to respect the doctors and the experts and say, keep us safe. And FDA and CDC and everything that falls under the Health and Human Services Secretary, that NIH is the crown jewel of this country. I don't want to be up here at some point and say NIH was the crown jewel of this country. We need to continue to lead on that. So I'm very concerned. What's Congress doing right now? We have to shine as bright a Klieg light, flashlight on that, so that spotlight, so that the country says, no, this isn't what we elected you for. The election last November was about lowering prices, about making life easier for families, helping them not just make ends meet, but to get ahead, to secure a better future for our kids than our parents sacrificed to give us. And taking away vaccines and advances in healthcare is not going to make their future better. It's going to make their future worse, and we have to fight it.
All right, we have time for about 2 more questions.
2 more questions.
Hello, my name is Julian Ruiz. I just wanted to ask, in the BBB, they got more than $200 billion for ICE. So I was going to ask, how are you going to help defund ICE and also ending aid to Israel to spend on instead, Medicare, Medicaid, SNAP, and Social Security for people at home?
So thanks. I will touch the second question first. I'm not going to end aid to Israel. I'm going to defend aid for Israel. I'm committed to Israel's security. As I said before, I'm committed to peace in the region. Thank you. Israel faces enemies like Hamas, like Hezbollah, like Iran, that have declared their intention to wipe the only Jewish state in the world off the map. Right? So I will continue to make sure Israel can defend itself. I will continue to pressure Israel to do so in a humane way. You may have seen that I criticized the settler violence that's been building in Israel, and I've spoken to the prime minister there, the ambassador, about that, because that's a threat to the peace, to the future. And so I'll continue to advocate for that, but I'll continue, as I said before, through Abraham Accords and other ways to advocate for peace for the region. It was less than 200 billion. I think it was 170 billion, as I said before. I voted against that bill. I'll continue to vote. We need border security. We need public safety, but it needs to be done in a way that reflects our values, that respects the dignity of all people, that doesn't put people in cages, doesn't separate children from their parents, doesn't cause fear and terror in communities across the country. And I'll continue to fight that every way I can. So thank you. So no pressure. You're the last question, the last thing everyone will hear. Hope it's a good one.
No pressure at all. My name is Terry Bangs. I'm from Libertyville, part of the Libertyville cabal that used to be sitting here. So it took us 248 and a half years to build a country that I think most of the people in this audience felt very proud of. and in only a shining city on the hill. And in only 6 months, the current administration has taken us back to the days of Reconstruction. So if in November of next year, we elect a Democratic majority in both the House and the Senate, a supermajority, what would be the first steps you think that Democratic majority could take to save this country and try to restore us back to where we were in January of this year?
So, before I answer the question, let me set expectations with it. It had nothing to do with that, but I think it's an important thing. So, with COVID, schools closed down, kids lost, in some cases, more than a year of education. And even if they were in school, it was a choppy year, it was a troubled year. And I took the position then that a kid in kindergarten was not going to be back on pace by the end of first grade, but it was going to take all the way through 12th grade before we get that kid where he would have been if not for COVID. And we need to have a long-term view. And I'm using that as just as an analogy. We're not going to flip a switch to undo the damage this administration is doing. And, you had a revolution that began actually before 1776. We made our Declaration of Independence a principle, all are created equal. We need to uphold that principle. But we had our first swing and miss before we got our Constitution, which didn't come into effect until 1789, a full 13 years after the Declaration was made. So we need to know that we're in it for the long term. But I am, like you, a proud American. I count my blessings every day that I was born in this country, and I wake up every day to know that I will fight for this country in every and any way that I can. So the first thing, assuming that I have the privilege of serving in the majority on January 3rd, 2027, is we put a block in the bad things that this administration is trying to do, because we restore to a degree the separation of powers. And for example, one big bad bill doesn't even see the light of day. We can actually work on good things. But I also recognize that we could pass not one big bad bill, but a small, perfect piece of legislation that precisely targets some serious but not overarching problem in this country that 100% of the United States population says, that's a good idea. And if the president vetoes it, not a single Republican would stand up and override that veto as we stand today. So it doesn't mean that we flip a switch, but we put in that block. And then we start working on rebuilding. We start working on rebuilding, restoring the respect the rest of the world has for us, that soft power we were talking about earlier, right? Reestablishing the agencies. Hopefully we don't get there where the court says, no, the president, the impoundment, this idea Congress can say, but we don't have to follow the instructions. Congress passes the law, the executive branch faithfully executes the law. That has to be put in place. So we start fighting for that again. And I guess the third thing, because there's a lot there, but once we put in the block, we have to get back talking to the American people, not just in places like Libertyville, Highland Park, or Lake Forest, Round Lake, Wheeling, and all the way out to Hebron. Our district is diverse and big, but we have to talk to people in Wyoming and in Hawaii and in Florida and every community in this country, saying that we're all in this together and we need to be rowing in the same direction, and that we don't have to agree on how we get there, but we need to know that it's not just the Declaration, all are created equal, it's the Constitution, we the people, and Abraham Lincoln, a government of the people, for the people, and by the people. And so the mission becomes, back to Abraham Lincoln's famous quote, is with public sentiment, anything is possible. Without it, nothing is possible. We have to go out and get the public sentiment and win the argument. And that's what we have to do it before. That's how you win elections. Once, if we get the majority, we have to make sure that people have faith. Restore faith in Congress, the earlier question, that government is working for us. It's making your life easier. It's not perfect, but thank God they're there. And that's what I want to get to. So with that, let me say thank you. I don't know if it's raining or dry outside, but either way, thank you for being here. It means a lot. Someone said it earlier. This is our democracy at work, the engagement of our citizens with our elected representatives. I work for you. It's the highest honor, greatest responsibility, but also the biggest privilege I've ever had. So I appreciate that, and I say thank you. We're in this together. My office is always open. My team, let me thank them. I know Ari is right here helping with the questions, Ari Botball. Jake Kaplan is our district director. Ari is our deputy director. I know Ivan was here somewhere. Ivan does outreach. Gloria, Laura, who am I missing? So that's our office here. We're here for you. If you have an issue with the passport, you have an issue with immigration or taxes, call us. If you have an issue with a pothole, you're welcome to call us. I just can't fix it. So it's the wrong number, but we'll get you the right number. So anyway, thank you all very much.